Welcome to Society of Women Engineers conference session on mastering difficult conversations while working remotely. I am Lori Reichel-Howe presenting this session, and unlike Alexis, who is pictured on this opening slide, I am not a chemical engineer. Instead, I am founder of Conversations in the Workplace. And I equip business professionals, managers, and teams to have what I call safe conversations. That is transformative dialogue that uncovers hidden workplace issues that exist in every career field inside of engineering and outside of engineering. So whether those issues are communication breakdowns, mismanaged expectations, cultural insensitivity, or just good old-fashioned bad behavior, professionals who engage in safe conversations foster greater innovation, inclusion, and collaboration within organizations. Now, if you work with people or interact with people, any kind of human being, you will need to have difficult conversations. And building and maintaining healthy relationships with those you interact with, well, it requires talking about behaviors that break down and erode those relationships. While addressing a concern or talking about an awkward or touchy subject, well, it can feel like you've been submerged into a shark tank. Today, you will learn how to implement a communication framework for mastering difficult conversations by transforming them into safe conversations. So here's what we will accomplish today. You will learn how to implement a safe conversations communication framework. And after this session, or as a result of this session, you will have developed strategies for effectively talking, listening, and collaborating at times when opinions differ, where conflicts erupt. You will be able to skillfully address sensitive issues, challenging behaviors by using the framework that we've reviewed. You will be able to therefore increase employee performance and team productivity. At the same time, you will be creating safety while decreasing workplace tension, because you will be talking and addressing the behaviors that cause that tension. So, difficult conversations. What do I mean by a difficult conversation? Well, anytime you experience any one of the following, you will be having a difficult conversation. When you are addressing the actions or behaviors of someone that negatively impacts you or others. Anytime you are addressing unmet expectation, miscommitments, communication breakdowns, anytime opinions differ, perspectives differ, and maybe even clash, and when values are different. Lastly, anytime you fear there will be defensiveness regarding bringing up a certain topic or issue. And I want you to know that the communication framework that I will demonstrate for you to implement can be used and effectively, whether you are having an in-person, face-to-face conversation, or whether it is a virtual screen-to-screen conversation. Because when the inevitable challenges arise, it is the way that people communicate that determines one's career success, as well as your team success and your organization success. or your lack of ability to communicate will determine the opposite: lack of success for yourself, your team, and your organization. When people and teams effectively communicate at these awkward times, they will they will experience high performance teams, because they will be able to get to the root of problems and find solutions. On the other hand, when we lack the skill to effectively communicate, and when the way we respond to differing opinions, different ways of doing things, competing priorities, when that results in strained working relationships, well, you've got then a low performing team, and the results are ugly and they are costly. So I would like to give you a moment to predict the answer to this question. It is estimated that over what percentage of all difficulties in organizations comes from strained relationships, not from hard skills, lack of skills, deficit, or motivation? Is it over 5 to 20%? Is it over 25 to 40? Over 45 to 60%, or over 65 to 80%? Here's the answer. Were you close? Over 65 to 80% of all difficulties in organizations are the result of strained working relationships. And at the root of strained working relationships is always unresolved conflict. How costly is it? Well, Daniel Dana, in his book, Managing Differences, says unmanaged employee conflict is perhaps the largest reducible cost in organizations today, and probably the least recognized. Now, those costs are experienced in wasted time, employee disengagement, failed projects, missed deadlines, and quite often attrition. People just up and quit. They're so frustrated. And unfortunately, organizations quite often lose the wrong people. When conflict erupts and relationships break down, anytime we have any of the following three: first of all, unmet needs. For example, in this picture, we see an unmet need. One person has the need for a deadline to be met, and therefore project completion. The other individual has the unmet need of needing to be involved and consulted in setting up realistic deadlines, and in being able to identify the resources needed and ensure they are promised and received in order to meet that deadline. So unmet needs, key reason for conflict and relational breakdown. We also experience conflict anytime our goals are blocked. And we've all experienced a time when someone or something is standing in the way of us meeting our goal. Lastly, anytime we feel disrespected or devalued, even just perceive that that is happening, well, relationships are strained and conflict erupts. You see, respect, it's like air. Once it's taken away, it's like you can't breathe, and it's all you can think about. The instant people perceive disrespect in a conversation, the interaction, well, it's no longer about the original purpose or topic. It's about defending dignity. Unmet needs, block goals, feeling of disrespect, they are registered in our brain as a 911 alarm. And it's very similar to what we would experience if a wild animal were released into the room. Our brain doesn't always discern the difference. And at these times, we have three typical human responses. Conflicts erupts, and our tendencies, number one, we freeze. And freezing is a good thing if you've stepped on a bee's nest, but unless we move from freezing to reflectively speaking up when a line is crossed and disrespect is sensed, well, we're going to be stuck. A second human tendency, very similar, is we flee or avoid. Now, this makes sense because when opinions differ, when emotions are strong and rising, it's human nature to back away and to avoid saying anything out of the fear that we could make matters worse. We humans avoid conflict as we would a fatal disease. And we tend to be better avoiders than influencers of change. Unfortunately, when we freeze, when we flee, we give up our power, and behaviors that are not addressed continue, and then they escalate. Now, our third tendency, oh my gosh, and this gets us into trouble, is we fight. Okay, we may not fight with fists, but we do fight in the workplace by arguing, sarcasm, biting remarks or accusations, even threats, passive aggressive. We disengage. We avoid people. We avoid encounters with them. We may even ignore their emails. So, three forms of workplace fighting that erupt in times of conflict and result in strained working relationships. I put them in alphabetical order. The first one is absolutes. This is a my way or the highway attitude. It's when people, their idea and their sense of security, their identity gets enmeshed. And they feel if someone doesn't take their idea or do things their way, they feel that they've lost power. And when we get concerned more about having our point of view considered right or accepted, well, we chuck integrity over the fence along with working relationships. Now, a second human tendency during conflict is to blame. If you've heard the line, it's all your fault, you've heard blame. And blame distracts us from really identifying causes and solutions. You see, it's the leader in the room, whether they have the designated title or not, that is able to identify and describe problems without blaming people, that is recognized as the true leader. These people, instead of blame, move conversations to what's contributed to this problem. Let's look at what I've done, what others have done, maybe where the process is failing for us. Let's identify those, take ownership and plans for moving forward and solving these problems. Now, a third tendency, absolute blame. The third one is character attack. And here is where instead of voicing frustration, discouragement about a missed deadline. Instead, one attacks the person who has missed the deadline, calling them irresponsible. Unfortunately, when people feel let down and their goals are at risk, they launch an attack on a person, which is far more hurtful than addressing behaviors or actions that have taken place or not taken place. Behaviors can be addressed without attacking people. Dialogue needs to be reframed to accountability, not character assassination. Attacking someone's character, well, it's like punching them in the gut, and you can't unpunch someone. So I would now love to hear from you. Think about, what is your tendency when conflict erupts, when a verbal bomb is dropped, when a disagreement erupts? Do you freeze? Do you flee? Or do you tend to fight? Think about, what is your typical response? Personally, I'm from a family of fleers and avoiders. That's led me on a journey to discover how to transform difficult conversations into safe conversations. I knew I would be stuck. Avoiding was not going to help me move forward. So, whatever your pattern, think about that and know that people quite often, I get a response from people that they do different, they have different patterns, and it can be situational based upon the trigger. A mother once told me, if anyone has anything negative to say about her children or reacts to them in a negative way, she moves right away into fight mode. But that might not be the behavior she moves into the workplace. Think about, what is the tendency you observe most often at your workplace? Is it absolutes? Is it blame? Is it character attack? And I will tell you that responses from people, again, fall between these three. So sometimes even a few other responses. What's unfortunate is that unless we develop the skills needed to address these inevitable workplace challenges, we will get stuck and remain stuck. So in my 20 plus years of training and doing relational management, I have had conversations with CEOs, and they will tell me, hey, Lori, we expect people to address issues of concern and talk about behaviors that negatively impact them or others. And to that I say, oh, okay. And so what kind of framework have you developed within your organization? And what kind of training have you done with your employees and teams so that they know how to speak up safely and address these issues? And then there's usually silence, because I've discovered that people do not arise to their expectations, but they fall to the level of their training. So today, what I am going to do, I do not want you to be stuck. And looks like I am a little stuck right now. Here we go. So today, I will demonstrate a communication framework for transforming difficult conversations into safe conversations. And not only will I describe a communication framework, I will also provide you with a demonstration of how Sophie, on your right, uses this framework to discuss her concern with Olivia of not being fully present during a virtual team meeting. Now, before dialoguing with Olivia, Sophie had a communication coaching session with me where she practiced implementing my safe conversations communication framework to prepare for this conversation with Olivia. And here is the framework that we worked on and that she practiced using. She opens up with a positive want. Positive want is where you describe what you want for this person. And in this case, Sophie will describe what she wants for Olivia. Ultimately, for Olivia to be successful at work. Opening up with positive wants is very effective because 97% of the time, the outcome when you open up with positive wants is a positive outcome to the conversation. Now, it's also okay to include what you want for yourself as well as for the team, others, or stakeholders. From positive wants, you go to identify the action, what the person specifically did or didn't do. Here's where you're talking about a performance gap, what you expected versus what you observed. And I always encourage using, whenever possible, an I statement. Opening up with an I statement versus you can sound, you need to stop. When you do, that can really come across accusatory. So watch how and listen to how Sophie opens up using an I statement, and you will hear that when you hear the words I noticed. Then she will specifically identify behaviors she noticed. Then she will talk about their impact, how those came across to her. Next, she will give Olivia a chance to talk. And in this case, Olivia is just going to jump in and talk. If Olivia didn't, she would invite a conversation. A great way to invite a conversation is to ask an open-ended question. You want to get the other person's perspective, get some background information. It's best to be curious, therefore avoid making accusations, and it allows you to collect some information. So at any time, be ready to acknowledge or to contrast. Whenever a conversation starts to break down, make sure to go ahead and acknowledge, voice and summarize the person's concerns. Once they know you have heard their concerns, quite often they need that in order to be able to hear yours. We become defensive. We keep trying to talk until we feel we have been understood. So acknowledgement can really help move the conversation and to keep you in conversation. Lastly, before the conversation ends, ask for an agreement moving forward. Here's where you talk about what you want from the person, and they can also ask for what they would like from you moving forward. So let's move into the demonstration. And remember, Sophie will open it up with positive wants, what she wants from Olivia. And I have got the words on the screen that she will be speaking, and I will read those out loud. Positive wants. Olivia, I want you to experience success here at this organization. I also want you to be recognized as a fully engaged team member. I made a few observations during today's virtual team meeting that I want to discuss with you. I noticed that your camera was turned off throughout the entire meeting. I also heard noise in the background that it sounded like typing on a keyboard. And at one point during the meeting, when you were asked a question, you didn't respond. And honestly, when your camera is off, when we hear keyboard clicking noises, and when you are unresponsive, I wonder whether you are fully engaged and committed to the project we are discussing. I'd like to hear your thoughts to better understand what was happening and what you were experiencing during the meeting. And here is really an invitation. In complete honesty, Sophie, I was trying to finish up a work project with a pressing deadline. I realize now that I should have put my work aside so I could fully engage in today's meeting. Olivia, thanks for being honest with me and explaining what was happening. Honesty is important for establishing trust. Moving forward, I need a commitment from you that you will fully engage in team meetings. This means camera on whenever possible and your full participation throughout the meeting. May I count on you to keep this commitment? And with that, we will stop that conversation. We will assume that Olivia agreed to that moving forward. And let me be, though, completely honest as well as realistic. There are times like this that a simple request like this, a conversation like this, will be received and changes will be made and a solution is found. I also know that more commonly, it will be likely that you will need a series of conversations, that you will also need to be ready for defensiveness to come and to be able to skillfully acknowledge contrast, stay in dialogue, also learn when to take a time out. And there's practice needed in learning to apply that with different people who respond differently will take time. And learning about the safe conversation communication framework, that's a first step, a foundational step on a journey of transforming the way you communicate, that your team communicates. This session should provide you with just a sneak peek into how to implement a safe conversations communication framework. If today's content resonated with you, and if you'd like to know more about my training programs for yourself, for your team, for your organization, feel free to go to my website at www.conversationsintheworkplace. You will see that picture on my homepage. Underneath the picture, you will see a Let's Talk button. Go ahead, click on that button, and then set up a complimentary 30-minute consultation with me. I would love to connect with you to help strategize a plan to transform the way you communicate and people communicate at your organization. So before bringing today's session to a close, let's summarize today's session as well as the action items. So focus of today was learn how to implement a safe conversation communication framework for effectively addressing challenging workplace scenarios. Now that today's session is over, you should be able to go back to that framework using any of those components, helping you. Those are strategies for developing responses for effectively talking, listening, and collaborating at times when conflict erupts, when opinions differ, and when there is just disagreement. You will be able to use that framework for skillfully addressing sensitive issues, challenging behaviors, using it for increasing employee performance and team productivity. The things that hinder productivity are usually the things we are not addressing and talking about. So use this framework to create safety and decrease workplace tension. SWE would love to hear from you. Please bring out your cell phone and take a picture of this QR code. This, in order to complete the survey and leave feedback for today's virtual session. Scan that code and you will be able to go to the site to give your feedback. And in closing today's session, I wish you success in transforming difficult conversations into safe conversations. And remember, this is done one safe conversation at a time. Thank you for attending today, as well as for completing this survey. Wishing you success in difficult conversations.